It's a very, very complicated ordeal to make a pro shot, and it doesn't always work. Hello there. I do believe it is time to sit down and put in those earbuds so as not to disturb the neighbors, because this is Off Book, a podcast about Broadway, movies, TV shows, and so many other nerdy things. I'm your host, Marc Stoufer III, and today's episode is all about Broadway Proshots. For those of you that don't know, a pro shot is exactly what it sounds like. The creative team of a Broadway show hires a team of filmmakers to make a high-quality filmed or professionally shot movie version of a show, sometimes with the original cast, like in Hamilton, sometimes with a later cast, like Rent Live on Broadway, and sometimes a combination, like Newsies. They are then normally released to a streaming service or in a theater. But in looking at the number of successful Broadway shows versus the number of pro shots, I realized that there aren't actually a ton of pro shots, and there are a lot of reasons why. A lot of the conversation around pro shots has to do with the debate as to whether a pro shot of a show that's currently running on Broadway will help sell more tickets or will convince people not to go see a show. On the one side, you have some people saying that if people can see a version of a staged performance of our show online or from the comfort of their homes or the theater, then they're much more likely to go see a show because they've seen it in this digital form, and so they're more likely to go want to watch it live, as opposed to seeing a show they haven't actually seen anything of and just think it sounds good. But on the other hand, you have people saying that if people can see a version of the show from a place that's convenient and inexpensive, they're less likely to go see the same show live, unless it's absolutely amazing. And I think that honestly, both of those arguments have value. I think that it's likely that the casual fans of a show will probably see a pro shot and go, okay, this is good enough. It's a good show, but not one that I'm willing to go see live. I've seen what the show is. I don't really see the need to go to a theater and pay a bunch of money to go see it differently. But I think you have a lot of the theater kids, and even people that aren't theater people normally, but just really like a show, they're more likely to go see it because they've seen a version of it and see, oh, this really is good. Not to mention that a lot of people get introduced to musicals through pro shots. So if you've never heard of a musical, and then you can go watch the pro shot of it on Disney Plus, you now know, hey, this musical exists. It's really cool. Let me go listen to the cast album. Let me go try to see the show. Let me try to support the show in other ways. And so now you have more people in the community. Whether they're going to go see it on Broadway or not, you have more people that are supporting the show and are spreading the word about it. Not to mention that getting a pro shot also gives news outlets a reason to spread your name, so the show gets more publicity, and whether or not it even increases ticket sales, it may be a positive move. However, the downside to that is that it costs a lot of money to make a pro shot. It costs a lot of money. It also is super hard to negotiate because technically a pro shot is a film. Even though it's a taped performance of a theater production and doesn't count for an Oscar, it is still a film, which means that the theater company has to work with all the screen guidelines and has to work with those actor guilds, and all the actors in the show, despite working in theater, not necessarily being a film actor, have to go join the Screen Actors Guild and their streaming rights and how you can distribute it, and it's a very complicated thing. So you end up with this kind of balancing act. You have to decide, is the potential positive attention, new people to the community, and increased ticket sales enough to outweigh the money that we're sinking into making a pro shot, the potential ticket sales we might lose through this, and also all of the logistics of trying to get this thing done. Because you also have to film it. There are various ways to film a pro shot. There are some that are filmed from a single camera in the audience, some have multiple cameras from like the wings or something. Some productions, like Hamilton, add extra shows so they can put cameras on stage. You can get those close-ups, which is going to create a richer experience, but it's also going to make it harder to do because now you need to get the actors in for another show that it wasn't on the calendar, which then means that you have to pay them more, which also means that they're doing something just for this, which makes it even more likely that you're going to get into more logistical issues with the Screen Actors Guild. So you have to try to figure out all these components, especially considering that not every show on Broadway makes its money back. There are a lot of shows that just don't make money, or maybe they make money but not enough money to recoup the money that they put into the show, because you have to spend money to make the show. And so if your ticket sales are less than that or even that amount, you haven't made any money. You need to earn the money you spend back before you can start making a profit. And so you end up with this thing of, okay, we're a new show. We don't know if people are going to like us. By the time that people want a pro shot, it's going to be immeasurably harder to get a pro shot made because we are selling out all these shows. These actors are in high demand. We're going to have to pay them more. And it becomes infinitely more complicated. However, if we do it now, if we film a pro shot and we have a film ready to go, that's great if people want it, but what if they don't? What if the show isn't successful? Then we spent all this money and tried to figure out all this logistics and got the contract signed and we had this film and nobody cares. So with a show like Hamilton, they could record it before it blew up entirely, knowing that that was probably okay because they knew that it was going to be a cultural phenomenon. But if a show isn't that, if it's not going to be guaranteed, how do you know whether to do it or not? Then there's the issue, of course, of how do you make it? Do you hire an outside company? Can the director of the stage show direct the film? How about music? How about audience sound effects? Do you mic an audience? Do you add sound effects in post? Do you get close-ups? Do you stay from the audience? How many shows do you combine? Is it a single performance or multiple performances? Hamilton has some continuity errors because of filming over multiple days. Is that okay or not? Do you film the wings? Do you film just the stage? Do you film the audience? What do you do for intermission? There are so many questions that need to be answered and so much editing that needs to happen because even Hamilton, had so many different camera angles and there were so many shots that were left on the cutting room floor because they captured so much. Not every show can do that. Can this show? Can that show? It's a lot of work to try to figure out how to make a pro shot, on top of already trying to decide if you want to make a pro shot, because the answer might be no. So what you end up with is that you have a lot of shows that people want pro shots of that don't have them, because to them, when they first opened, it wasn't worth the risk to put all that money and all that time and all that work in it to make a film that they didn't know if people were going to want to see or not. And then by the time people did want it, it became too hard to do, or they couldn't make it happen due to logistics. There's also the question of when do you release it? Lin-Manuel Miranda had said that he wasn't going to release Hamilton until after Hamilton stopped selling out on Broadway. Obviously, it's still doing that. It's closed right now due to the pandemic, but they were selling out beforehand. They'll probably sell out again after they reopen. So do you release it after it's closed? Newsies didn't get released until after the show closed and after the tour had ended. Hamilton got released while it was still selling out on Broadway. You look at some shows like Beetlejuice that everyone wants a pro shot of because nobody got to see it because it was only on Broadway for less than a year, and now they're closed. So hopefully they filmed a pro shot while they were there, but what if they didn't? If they didn't, then unless they come into theater and get the cast back to do it, you won't ever get a Beetlejuice pro shot, which is something that you have to consider. It's a very, very complicated ordeal to make a pro shot, and it doesn't always work. Today's episode is sponsored by Jerry's Theatrical Recordings. Because of how complicated it is for a show to get a pro shot, a lot of people can't see their favorite show on stage. But Jerry's Theatrical Recordings is here to help. If there isn't a pro shot available for a certain show, just tell Jerry and he'll buy a ticket to see the show. From there, he'll discreetly record the performance from his subpar seat and make the footage available to watch. The video won't ever be in focus, and the audio will be terrible, but it's better than nothing. Go to www.jerrystheatricalrecordings.com and use code BOOTLEG for 15% off your first video. That's www.jerrystheatricalrecordings.com with code BOOTLEG for 15% off your first video. And now, more on bootlegs. Bootlegs is really the second half of the pro shot conversation, because when people want to see their favorite show, but can't afford to go see it on Broadway, and there isn't a film version, a lot of people will turn to bootlegs. For those of you who don't know, a bootleg is an illegally recorded video of a Broadway performance. It is illegal to do, but a lot of people do it anyway. Basically what happens is someone buys a ticket to go see a show, and then from their seat as they're watching the show, somebody will film the stage. It's not a good quality because they're generally not great seats, and it's a pretty terrible camera because they're trying to hide it from the ushers that will occasionally walk by. The audio quality isn't good. It's not a good representation of what the show is. But for a lot of people, it's the only way they can see a Broadway show. You find this a lot with shows that have already closed, or the original Broadway company of a show when the original cast has already left. So prior to the Hamilton pro shot, a lot of people were probably watching Hamilton bootleg with the original cast because you can't see that anymore. The conversation about bootlegs is really interesting because everybody that's in the theater community seems to really be for them. Their reasoning is that we can't go see your show on Broadway. It's super expensive. But we know that it has to be expensive. We're not mad at you, We wish it didn't have to be this way. Maybe it doesn't. That's a conversation for another day. But we can't go see it on Broadway. You haven't made a pro shot. You have left us no options to see your show. A lot of cases, like I mentioned, the show is already closed or the original cast has already left, so there is no way to see that version of the show at all, except for bootlegs. So all of the theater community really likes bootlegs because it's a way to expose people to theater. You get to see the show, you get to know more about the show. A lot of people get introduced to a show through a bootleg because they can't go see it on Broadway, so maybe they don't know it exists until they watch the bootleg, and then they go start listening to the cast album and buying the merchandise, and maybe eventually going to see a later cast of the show when it goes on tour, or if it has a secondary production like in Chicago or even on the West End. And so it seems like it would be a good thing to have a bootleg. However, there are really two main issues with it. First of all, it is illegal, and it's illegal for a lot of the same reasons that it's so hard to make a pro shot to begin with. First of all, you're not paying the actors to film them. And while it may seem like that's not a problem, it is, because like I mentioned, a pro shot or a bootleg is a filmed version of the theater production, which makes it a motion picture, it makes it a movie. And the actors have to be paid for appearing in that movie, even if all they did was do their job that they were already getting paid for. So in order to legally release this bootleg, you need to pay the actors. You would also need to get all the actors to sign a contract with the Screen Guild in order to appear legally in a motion picture. And obviously you can't do that from your seat 7 rows back from the second balcony. So because of all this, it is incredibly illegal to do this. However, that may not be the biggest detractor for a lot of musical theater fans. You remember how I said that everyone inside the theater community was really for bootlegs? Yeah, except for everybody working in theater. Theater producers and writers and actors have been adamantly against bootlegs for as long as I can remember, probably longer than that. They point, first of all, to the fact that it is legal, which it is, but also that it's disrespectful to the cast, that it is stealing ticket sales from their show, and that it is an inaccurate representation of their production. There have been a lot of people working in the industry who have posted on social media, made videos, and have really tried to express how much they dislike bootlegs. And a lot of people in the community see those arguments and say,
okay, yeah, it is legal, but there's
the illegality of it always gets brushed aside. It is illegal, but nobody really cares. Nobody's going to do anything about it because it's so hard to do. And I think that the shows themselves recognize that it is giving you publicity. There are people seeing your show and getting exposed to your show through bootlegs. So to shut them down would kind of be harmful to the show. But at the same time, they can't endorse them for all the other reasons, like stealing ticket sales and being an inaccurate representation of the show. And a lot of people that aren't working on Broadway point out that those two are kind of opposites. You claim that it's stealing ticket sales, but you even point out that it's not an accurate representation of your show. No one's going to watch a terrible iPhone video of Hamilton and say,
oh, this was a terrible video, but it's good enough.
Like I mentioned with pro shots, there will be some people that will do that, but it's the same people that are satisfied watching a pro shot. So if somebody's willing to just settle for a video of a performance, they're going to settle for a video of a performance no matter how good it is, and they're not going to see your show whether they watch a bootleg or not. But the people that want to see a show are going to try to go see the show whether they can see bootleg or not. So a lot of people claim that yes, there are bootlegs, but really all that does is expose people to the show and make them want to go see it. But then theater producers come back and say,
well, it is illegal and it's disrespectful.
You end up with this kind of push-pull where all the fans are saying that we should be able to do them if you're not going to provide us with a pro shot. Most producers are saying that you shouldn't be able to, and they're going to try to punish you if you do. There are some notable exceptions. Sixteenth, the musical, is infamous for actually saying, hey, you're going to want to take out your cell phones for this, to the audience in the middle of the show. Now, Six does kind of break the fourth wall and is more of a concert type of vibe than a traditional show, but Six is a show that embraces the idea that people are going to film this and are going to post it to social media and it's going to get a lot of online hype. And it did. Not to mention that Heathers the musical played off-Broadway and didn't do well at all, comparatively speaking. And then TikTok videos and bootlegs and a whole bunch of other things that are technically illegal sparked online interest into the show, and everyone got really excited. And Heathers moved to the West End and did pretty well. And so this leaves you with a really weird trend where everybody in the industry seems to hate bootlegs, even though bootlegs seem to only do good things for the show, especially if they're not going to create a pro shot. So I think the question is, what's the solution to all this? when most Broadway shows can't find a way to make a pro shot, even though people might want it, because they don't know when they have the resources to film it if people are going to want to see it or not. By the time people want it, it's too complicated to make. It's complicated no matter when you make it, and it's super hard to do, especially with a lot of shows becoming popular after they're closed. How do you make a pro shot? And if you can't make a pro shot, what do you do about bootlegs, which are the closest thing anyone's going to get? Is it okay in certain circumstances, when the show's already closed or if it's a cast that's already left? How do you regulate this? There are some people that are trading bootlegs, that are saying, I have a bootleg of this show, I have a bootleg of this show, let's trade. And that may not be literally making money, but it is bartering. It is essentially selling your bootlegs, which are illegal to begin with. So it's a very complicated issue, and honestly, I don't know what the solution is. I don't know what we do from here. I think that ideally, we would just give every show a pro shot. Use it or you don't. But then who pays for that? Because the show won't pay for a film version of the musical if they don't think people are going to go see it. But at the same time, how can you risk not having a version of it if people will do? Knowing the bootlegs will come no matter what you would decide. But that releasing a pro shot drastically decreases the amount of bootlegs, because who's going to want to watch a terrible iPhone video when you have a professionally shot version of the show with close-ups on your favorite streaming service? But it's super hard to do. So I don't really know what the solution is. Maybe some of you know, maybe a theater producer knows, maybe this battle will continue forever and ever and ever. But until we find out, this has been Off Book. Next week I'll be talking about the difference between blockbuster movies and independent films. Make sure you join me for that. Until then, go watch a pro shot, but not a bootleg, because it's illegal. See you next week.